What is fate? Fate is when our past actions and desires invariably and always affect us. Fate itself is comprehensible to those who see their lives more deeply and know it, which is a tough road to hoe for a human being as we evolve, but our abilities are limited. We have no conception of our past lives, we do not remember them, and that is one of the principal limitations we face. We have serious difficulties in perceiving our future, although the future can be sensed and so can be the past. These difficulties indicate that we are not developed well enough. We immerse ourselves immensely in mundane day-to-day concerns, issues that are connected with us right now, with our lives, for we know not that something could be far more valuable than that. For instance, people don't know that if they learn to love others and take care of them, if they endeavor to comprehend how to live in the right way, the fruits of such righteous deeds stay with them forever. But if a person devotes their chief effort to achieving comfort in their life right now, such as having a good family, a dwelling and the like, then it's all temporary. It will all vanish somewhere further along the line, and there will be nothing left at all. I once saw how a woman passed away, and after a couple of weeks her children began to ditch all the old furniture through a window of her flat on the 9th floor. And then a shower of her photographs ensued. She had been amassing it, thinking it was important. Yet it turned out to be significant only to her. You see, that's how we live. Who amongst you keeps miscellaneous items, old valuables? Perhaps only those who have a lot of respect for their relatives. But in general, everything old is disposed of and supplanted by something new. And what do people live for? For the sake of those items they amass, and then everyone goes into nothingness. However, a person's character remains with them forever. But even as I'm speaking about it now, you will say, well, Oleg Gennadievich, you see, we need to feed and clothe our children and so forth. We have no money in our country, we have to focus on that. And I do understand it, but you also should realize that it's all temporary. And if it is all temporary, then people ruin their lives by living in the wrong way. If we do not invest in what is of the uttermost importance, then we weaken year by year. Let's say people ask me, why has our family fallen apart? That's because there are 3 layers of personal life in the family. In the bottom layer, people only crave personal happiness at any cost. They fight and quarrel interminably, they start drinking, and then split up. This inevitably leads to divorce. If people set higher goals, they think, we must bring up children, save up for an accommodation. So if they set some higher objectives and begin to work hard for it, they will stay together for some time. But when they start getting weary of what they are doing, of their daily toil, and when they begin to reap the fruits of their labor at least a little, their heart will feel that their life goes in the wrong direction. Funnily enough, most frequently people conclude that they met the wrong person. They draw totally wrong inferences. They think, I live with the wrong person. They don't have a clue that they just don't live in the right way. Thus, in the second layer of personal life, people break up as well. In the overwhelming majority of cases, after about 6 to 10 years of living together, and only when people start working hard on themselves, praying, developing themselves as individuals, and learning to serve each other, can they really keep their family together for life. And yet not all of them, because sometimes they don't have enough time left. At times, the burden of fate that has been accumulating is so large that people don't manage to keep the family together in this life, even if they strive to do it. But that doesn't mean they won't succeed. They may cope with it in the end, but nonetheless there is ruination and creation unfolding in tandem, the former having been accumulated earlier than the latter. If we haven't defined and set the right life values, the family cannot be saved. See, that's curious. We may have set the wrong values, but what does that have to do with family? It turns out that a family can only be preserved through conscience. If you have developed as an individual and your conscience has begun to work, then it will give you the knowledge of what to do, whether to forgive or to tolerate, and so forth. It'll steer you, giving you hints. Otherwise, you won't manage to preserve anything. You'll act out of revenge, trying to get back on someone and so on, which only wrecks relationships, that's all. The lady that asked me a question recently, her consciousness is very much evolved. She said, he has cheated on me, but she is resolved to make him return, which is indicative of her potent character. And she is determined to pray and wait for this man. This is a very powerful position in life, and such a woman will definitely be happy in her personal life, beyond any doubt, when she passes all her exams and trials. You just have to work hard and realize that your life doesn't depend upon any particular person. But it very much hinges on how well you fare whilst passing exams from the past. And understand one thing, most of you don't know anything about the past because it is extremely hard to find out. I've been giving lectures in Chisinau lately. I already knew that I had lived somewhere in the West in my previous life. When I arrived in Chisinau and beheld the Moldovans, I felt deep down that I bore a certain relation to them and that land. So I started praying and saw the place where I dwelt in my past life. I got a feeling that it was somewhere in Romania, between Romania and Moldavia. I could genuinely feel it. If I had been given a ride in a car, I could have discovered this place, without a doubt. I had already had the vision of myself in my past life previously, but now it is becoming clear. And such things gradually open up, they are gradually revealed to a person. Many of you have thought, well, Oleg Gennadievich must be at the initial stage of schizophrenia. I have intercepted such thoughts on your part now as well. And that's fine. I agree with you that it's all right to think that way, because such things may well be completely beyond you. But if I give you some hints now, you can resist them too, of course, but they may be indicative of something. You see, there are two categories of boys who are born. Boys in the first category are very courageous, they behave very bravely, they have no fear. However, boys in the second one are very whiny. They are so tender and grumpy as if they were not boys at all, but girls. And it is said about such boys that they should have been born girls, but were born boys. No, they were supposed to be born boys. It's just that they were girls in their previous life, they were women. And those boys who are bold, valiant, they were men in their previous life. Similarly, there are two categories of girls. Some of them behave like boys in early childhood, whereas the other one behave like girls. Those who act like boys, they were men in their previous life. And the ones that act like girls, they were women. And when a girl acts like a girl, she becomes very strong in feminine qualities in this life. And the one who behaves like a boy, she realizes that she is in a woman's body only after some time, let's say by the age of 12. Let's say she has a brave character in childhood, she's fearless. Somewhere around the age of 12, she suddenly starts to be afraid of everything. Could those of you raise a hand who has experienced that? You were undoubtedly men in your previous life. There's no doubt about it. Everyone who has raised their hands. Likewise, men have become brave with the passage of time, but they were faint-hearted as children. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, you were women in your previous life. That has been my case. I was a woman in my past life. I was in a woman's body, as it is said. Some people say it's impossible, we only live one life. How come? Let's say, even if we talk about one life, we have changes going on all the time. You've already changed your body many times. Are you conscious of that? You have changed your body multiple times, even in your present life. You had the body of a small child. Then after 7 years, all the atoms in your body were completely replaced. Every 7 years, all the elements of the body are substituted by new ones. It's already a different body, a new one. But the person inside remains the same. Even from this point of view, we have to realize that we don't live in the same body. It changes all the time. That is, there is the psyche and there is the gross body. And the psyche of a human being accumulates the events and knowledge from all the past lives. God has once shown me briefly a series of my past lives. And I wanted to see further and further. And at some point I saw an elongated body, a long one. I clearly felt that it was my body, and I was devouring someone's flesh. Moreover, I felt that I couldn't taste much. I felt that I liked it exactly because it was alive. I savored the flavor of the flesh of living creatures, and my body was so clumsy. I twigged that it was the body of a crocodile. I was staggered. That was many, many, many lifetimes ago. I mean, even this body has memorized it. Every now and again I fly in my dreams. I just soar in the skies. It was the body of a bird. The memory has remained. A bird derives the greatest happiness from flying. Flight is its happiness. And that's why it gets the body of a bird, in order to fly. But I'm telling you now the things that are beyond the human mind. You can say all birds are inanimate. How can they be inanimate? There are clear signs of life. If something longs for happiness, let us say a tree reaches for the sun. If a bird is drawn to another bird, it is a sign of life, wherefore there is a soul there. If there is love, it is another sign of life. Is there love between birds? Yes, it's a sign of the presence of a soul. Is there love between dogs? There is. Between fish? There is as well. A plant loves the sun, it reaches for the sun. That's love too. There are defenses. Trees have bark, animals have fur, fangs, tusks, horns, and so forth. That is, if there is defense, if a living being defends its life, that's another sign of the presence of a soul. There is a variety of signs. The possibility of reproduction is also a sign of soul presence. The very ability to form a complex structure called a material body is a clear sign of the presence of a soul. Even any tree is a structure of tremendous complexity. It is unrealistic for a human to create something like this. We can only influence the genes and thus it will grow differently. But we cannot create a tree ourselves and grow it, because that's what the soul does. Man can't grow anything. That's how a man says, I've grown a crop. You have sown the seeds. You could have even irrigated the seeds, but you have not grown the crop. It is the soul that grows the ears of wheat. We can only grow our own body likewise. In other words, this world is so intricate and profound that we don't need to make judgments about it. To simplify, people say animals don't have souls, for the sake of simplicity only, to avoid complicating matters. But there's a soul there, and even germs have a soul. There are different forms of life, and they are designed for different purposes. For instance, if you ask everyone, what do you live for? They reply, we live for happiness. You're wrong. It is not humans who live for happiness, but animals. Every single animal lives exclusively for happiness. And it gets much more happiness than a human being. That is why people are drawn to animals. For this reason, people keep cats at home in order to get the energy of relaxation. Often people are very stressed at work and can't relax and rest. But the cat was born to experience the greatest pleasure from relaxation. And that's why the cat's body is designed in such a way that if you lift its leg, it holds on and doesn't fall. The cat is so relaxed, its whole body is very soft and relaxed. And humans crave the same. Therefore, they cuddle a cat and enjoy its relaxing energy. And all the people who live only for the sake of happiness think, I want only happiness, nothing else. This means they will conceivably acquire an animal body in their next life. Not necessarily, yet highly likely, because it is possible to alter your desires. I am telling you very difficult things for comprehension. You might think I'm being childish right now. You may think so. But if you're reasonable and intelligent people, you'll start thinking about patterns. For example, when I frequently traveled to Dnipropetrovsk to give lectures, about 20 years ago or so, I gave a seminar there on the law of karma. Roughly on the same topic we are broaching right now, and I was accommodated in the house of a man who also listened to my lectures. And at the end of that seminar, he came to me and said, I'm going to tell you one thing. Please be discreet about it, because this is a fantastic issue for me. I'm either out of my mind or something else, but I can really see it. And I can't do anything about it. He confided to me that his parents, who had rowed a great deal with each other, had been very much attached to that house. And they had no interest in self-improvement. They just enjoyed life, quarreled, squabbled, and so on. They lived their whole lives together. And then one by one they passed away. About 8 or 9 months later, 2 puppies started whining and whimpering outside their house unceasingly. He didn't know what to do about that. When he let them in, he made 2 kennels for them and began to live with them, and then suddenly felt later they were like family to him. So he loved them very much. Then the female puppy started eating the food that his father had usually eaten. And he discerned familiar features in the puppy's snout, reminiscent of his father's face. And strangely enough, the male puppy and its demeanor bore a likeness to his mother. When they grew up, they started fighting and barking at each other terribly. And he could clearly recognize the emotions and demeanor of his parents, and he was taken aback by that. God has shown him something. You know, you can get into a dog's body, but you may deem me to be insane. And you may have the impression that I am telling you rubbish. It's all right. Even if you disbelieve what I said, you have the right not to believe it. It's absolutely normal. For this world is so complex and varied, it is hugely difficult to comprehend how it works. Anyway, the human form of life is not meant for happiness. It is meant for self-development. And a person genuinely obtains tremendous happiness when they fare well in that activity. Thus, a human being has to find out that they are a soul, that they are eternal. They have to begin to believe in God, learn to pray, learn to work on themselves, learn to be patient, to forgive, to devote themselves very much to something in their life. No animal can forgive. No animal can believe in God and make a conscious commitment to something in its life, not just out of necessity. Dogs, too, are devoted to their master's life. They believe in their master, only out of necessity. When the master changes, they believe in another one. A human is an intelligent living being, and we must learn to live first and foremost. We study maths, physics, and chemistry, but first of all, we have to learn to live. There will be nothing good in life unless we understand what the human form of life is designed for. Because if we direct our life incorrectly, then all the other things that happen around us are incomplete. The Vedas say that if a man draws water from the river, it is sufficient for everything, but if they draw it from wells, there may not be enough water there. Not only the Vedas, but all the scriptures state the same truth. Similarly, if a person knows the ultimate goal of their existence, they receive ample energy of happiness, so that it is sufficient for everything, for all their goals. Some people say, I have no desire to be a monk or a nun whatsoever. What's in it for me? Please understand that we are talking about the energy of happiness right now. All human beings lack the energy of happiness, and therefore they crave it. But they are unaware that if a person stops living for the sake of happiness and starts living to serve God, people, and nature, then the energy of happiness flows into them itself, because that's the way our life works. If our love is not for ourselves but for nature, then it gives us health. If we love people, not ourselves but people, then people give us social power. All kinds of social power come from people, from the fact that we love them. They give us this power. In order to get married, you have to love people in a certain way. To have a good job, you need to love people in a certain way. You also have to love people in a certain way to advance in society. And all these different kinds of love are different kinds of human power in this world. And if you lack that power, then you have no conception of that love and these possibilities within you. And if a person loves God in various ways, they transcend their fate in various ways. Fate can only be surmounted with the help of God. People can help, of course. Be able to love, be able to forgive, and to give yourself fully. I don't intend to teach you Vedic philosophy. I am also fond of Christian, Muslim, and Jewish knowledge. I study all that. I like it all. There is no need to think that I am necessarily imposing Vedic knowledge on you, as it is sung in Vysotsky's song, and if you are daft as a tree, you will be born a baobab. And if you've lived as a pig, you'll remain a pig. A good religion has been invented by the Hindus. When you die, you don't die at all. You don't necessarily need to think that way. We're going to talk now about our life and our fate, and about the patterns that we all need to know. Thus, fate is woven from our past actions and desires. They determine everything in our lives. For example, a person is born in a female body if they have a strong desire for love and harmony in life. For that very reason, not because the zygotes were arbitrarily arranged in a certain way. They were actually arranged in the right way, those zygotes, because there is the subtle body which affects everything that happens on the gross plane, and it influences chromosomes and DNA. Things don't happen by chance. There is the subtle body or the psychical body, and the human destiny lives in it, so everything has already been taken care of. Ancient doctors could sense the subtle channels. They could examine how the psychical channels were formed in a child in the womb. These channels that form the gross body are called srotas. Ancient doctors could tell by the pulse which srotas were not forming properly. And they could forecast intrauterine abnormalities in a baby's development. And it turns out that sound can influence these channels, especially when a child is still developing. And they used sounds, prayers, and mantras, if you wish, to eliminate the hereditary disorders in a child. Can you imagine how intelligent they were in life? They didn't have computers or any other devices at their disposal. They did it with the help of the mind. The mind is a very powerful instrument, capable of perceiving a person's fate. Fate works through the eyes. The voice is a sign of the intelligence. The sound itself is related to a person's intelligence. For this reason, you have to choose a person on the basis of their communication style, not on the basis of their eyes. Eyes connect two destinies. Like verses from a song, I peer into you as if into a mirror. as though into my self-reflection, and I see my love in it, and I think of it. Let us not see trivia in the reflection. Love may be long, but life is even longer. I peer into you as if into a mirror, that is, fate is in the eyes. People are united through their hearts. For the sake of high love, we must remember that we and our loved ones are bound for life by an unseen, intangible thread. Which means that we look and connect with people through our eyes, yet the bond is established in our hearts. And that's why a mother worries about her child, because she is tied to her child in the heart. And she gives the energy of happiness to the child whilst being uneasy. And when she is in despair, feeling that something is wrong, then it indicates that she has run out of this energy of happiness and can no longer help the child. We sense the fate of a loved one and sense our own fate. Great anxiety emerges in the heart for the person we are connected with. Fate is located right here in the heart. A person may think, something is going wrong in my life. It has become hard to live lately. Raise your hand who is experiencing this right now. You're not mistaken. You're all going through a hard period at present. It will last for a certain amount of time on a case-to-case basis, but you're not wrong. It's true. You feel right. A person can sense their fate. It is not drawn on the palm of a fortune teller, and it is not in an astrologer's computer either. It's drawn in your own heart right here. Learn to accept it and to feel it. The first rule is that you must first accept your fate so as to be able to sense it. If you don't accept it, if you disagree with what is happening, then you will never understand your destiny. Some people ask me, should I stay in this country or should I leave? Accept the country where you live first, then you will understand whether to leave it or not. 20% that you should leave, 80% that you should stay. Rough statistics. But you don't know what percentage you belong to. One must first accept their country and its fate. And when you accept it, then you will comprehend your fate. If you want to understand whether you should live with this person or not, you must first accept them. This person represents your own fate. For nothing in this world is accidental. Everything is connected with our destiny and nothing else. And you listen to my lectures not by chance either. You do it because you once longed to acquire this knowledge, and thus you receive it. But in this case, it is no longer called fate. This is called the grace of God. That is, God always steers a human being somewhere in their life. When you listen to me, you have to figure out if this is the right path or not. But to this end, you do not need to surf the internet browsing for Torsunov. To this end, you have to ask your own heart and your elders, if you have them, and they will tell you everything. Gossip doesn't help sort things out. There's plenty of gossip around right now. Conversely, the elders do help. Some people say, I am a religious person, a very strong believer. My mentor has told me not to listen to your lectures. What do you think I ought to do? I reply, don't listen if your mentor says, heed their counsel. You have a mentor, why do you need to listen to my lectures? You've already chosen your path in life. I help those who haven't made up their minds yet. Thus, destiny is located right here, in the heart. There are unseen threads of destiny that tie us to other human beings. Destiny can be perceived through the eyes. For instance, a person's willpower and their social activities are located in the right eye. If the right eye is strong and active, then the person is socially potent. I say strong activity, and you'll ask me, how do you see that? Is it bigger in size? I'm not talking about size right now. I'm talking about what we see in the eyes. We see something different in the eyes. So it's not the structure of eyelashes that we see. We see the eyelashes and other things later. Let's say if you like the energy of a person, your heart likes it, then you'll pay attention to the body. You will start to evaluate their body afterwards. Those freckles are a light, and where does she get them from? That is, you pay attention to such things later, but first you see and feel the fate. You feel your own destiny in another person. And a person believes at first that their destiny is something good. And that is good. Otherwise, people wouldn't get married. If people could perceive on the spot everything that a loved one would bring to them later, they would never live together. For this reason, God tricks us a little bit. He first shows us all the good things, lures us saying, here is your destiny, behold it. He first shows us the soul in a person. He shows the most important thing, the soul. And that's why a person falls in love. Why a person falls in love is because they behold the soul in a person. God shows all the most significant things. Do not aspire for anything further. Memorize what you have beheld first. Learn to see your loved one always as they were shown to you in the first place. And you will see your destiny blessing your life in this person. See the person as you were shown in the first place. A little child sees the soul in his parents and later forgets it. They love their parents very much as a child because they see the soul that God shows. But later we begin to notice the flaws in a person and thus become defiled. We are supposed to see these flaws as it is our fate. However, grace always comes first. First, God shows us all the best, and then He gives us the opportunity to learn to see the best through suffering, walking that path. Now, a person's personal life, their close relationships, love and tenderness are located in their left eye. In the right eye, there is the will of a man, their ability to win, their endurance and resolve. In the left eye, there is kindness, gentleness, and the beauty of a human being. If both eyes are tense, it means that the person is going through a difficult time in their life. Eye strain is not a sign of glaucoma. It means that is how the psyche works. A man's psyche is tense. You look into your loved one's eyes and ask, "What's wrong?" And they reply, "It's become difficult to live lately." That's how fate works. And a person starts to search for the reason, wondering, perhaps I've been cursed, maybe it's the wrong country, maybe it's something else. They say, "I'm having a hard time in life." There's no way they can assume that it's their fate at work. They think they might be having ill luck. And that's exactly what every person thinks. People always lay the blame on their loved ones. Let's say you've been having trouble lately with a loved one. You say, "Oleg Gennadievich, I have such a person. They are a trial. It's very hard to live with them." It's not the person, it's the way fate works. And it does it through this person. And when you realize that, you will overcome your fate quicker. You will manage to get over your fate in the end. For the clue indeed is to separate your fate from the person through whom it tortures you. When we become strongly attached to a person, when we think that it's their fault that we are experiencing trouble right now, we cannot defeat fate. Because there are 3 steps to overcoming one's fate. The first step is to stop blaming anyone for my problems, realizing, only theoretically at this point, that all the people around me personify my fate. For this world is extremely intricate and absolutely harmonious at the same time. Everything that exists around us, every human being, it's all related to our fate. And all this is not given to us arbitrarily, but owing to the way we used to behave and act once. About a week and a half ago, I held a webinar, and one woman said to me, "I've been very cruelly dumped by my loved one. I loved him very much, and he just got rid of me cruelly, saying, 'I'm not going to live with you,' and went away. I've prayed so hard to God since then. I've sobbed, exclaiming, 'Why, my Lord, why have you done this to me? I accept everything and I agree with everything.'" Now look how she began to pray. "Lord, show me why I have to deal with all this now. Show me, please." And suddenly she beheld a scene. A woman is sitting in utter despair. The woman is sitting in front of her, and she is apparently a man in this scene, and says to this woman sitting before her in despair, "I'm leaving you." And the woman pleads, "Stay with me, please," sitting on her knees, sobbing, grasping at the man's legs. And he replies, "No," and walks away. I said to this lady, "You left your loved one in a previous life. Being a man, you left your woman. She suffered so much more than you are suffering at the moment, incomparably more. She basically lost her life because of you. And for this reason, you are now being punished. As a matter of fact, you committed it 2 lifetimes ago, and you've been held accountable for that for 2 lives already." And she said to me, "Oleg Gennadievich, I have seen it." And she described this scene to me and noted, "When I beheld it, I couldn't grasp what I had seen or why, but I've seen exactly what you said. I've seen that woman," and so on. You see, it's all true, yet we have no knowledge about it. You may say, what kind of injustice is this? Why don't I know what I'm suffering for? Why has God designed it this way? Why is everything so unjust? Understand now that it is characteristic of an enlightened and developed personality to have knowledge about one's past and one's mistakes. And that's something you have to attain. Thank God you were born to live in the human form of life. That's already great for a start. We just need to comprehend how this world is designed. Namely, that we were born as humans, we can learn everything deeper, which is already superb to begin with. But a man is not evolved enough to know everything. They are just beginning to progress. The Vedas describe 5 stages of development of the soul. What is meant here is consciousness, the stages of development associated with consciousness. Thus, let us take a look at the first stage. Consciousness is the energy of the soul. We are all souls and we have the energy of consciousness. And so this consciousness can be covered by layers of ignorance to varying degrees. And it is stated in the Vedas that when the mind is heavily covered by ignorance, a soul does not realize it is a soul, it does not remember itself. Its life is called sleep without dreams, as though it slumbers eternally like a sleeping princess. Indeed, the princess is in an everlasting deep slumber. She is seemingly alive, yet at the same time she slumbers and is unconscious of anything. Even people can fall into a lethargical sleep or sopor. That is, they live, but at the same time do not remember or understand anything. This option is inherent in us. But there's also another one. People stop acting like human beings and act like animals. But that's not what we're going to talk about now. Thus, these are plant forms of life. That is, a soul dwells in the body of a plant, let it be a tree. What kind of life is this? It sleeps, it rests, it only wants to sleep long enough. It is sick of everything. Its only desire is to be happy, and that's it. It is loath to toil and overexert itself. Alright, then get the body of a tree. There is such an option. You can only experience happiness for many, many years. You may say, I don't need 5 years of happiness. I need 1,000 years of happiness. Okay, the body of certain trees grows for 1,000 years, no problem. And there is only happiness, nothing else. And a tree aspires for happiness throughout its lifetime. As it grows, it falls asleep ever deeper. When the branches are trimmed, it wakens for a fleeting instant, as though asking, what's happening? And grows better afterwards. That's why a tree is trimmed, to awaken it a little. If the tree is good, then it feeds everyone with beautiful fruits. But if it is evil, then it has poisonous fruits. This is the nature of any particular tree. There are different types of character in trees. Good trees accumulate good faith, then progress, and so on. The next stage of consciousness development is sleep with dreams. This is already an animal form of life and it evolves. Darwin asserts that first a bacterium emerged, then some mutation occurred, which in turn led to its transformation into a tortoise all at once. Gradually, perhaps not immediately, but as a result of mutation. Later scientists started performing mutations and nothing good came of it. They strove to create natural selection and they carried out these mutations. As it turned out, all sorts of mutations lead to degradation rather than development. And scientists have not managed to make a living being gain something better and not worse through mutations. They claim that it takes billions of years and over billions of years of mutation, they may eventually manage to attain something better. I'm not against all these theories. I'm just telling you what I have learned from my elders and what I myself have learned to see and understand to some extent. So here we go. Jellyfish. They barely have any consciousness at all. That is, they are still asleep, almost like plants. Therefore, this life form is very much akin to a plant life form. Then there is fish. Fish have only emotions of fear and pleasure in their eyes. There is nothing else, neither smiles nor anything else. They only experience fear and pleasure in their lives. That is all. Look into its eyes through the glass of an aquarium. You will only see fear or happiness. There are no other emotions. Next comes the lizard. It already has curiosity and shows strong activity. It tends to explore everything and may even demonstrate signs of anger. The fish has no anger, just fear and pleasure, but the lizard already has some emotions. Then comes the bird. The living being, the soul, in the body of an animal begins to awaken. It is sleep with dreams. And the bird already chirps and twitters. There is only fear in its eyes too if you peer into them, but it already exudes happiness by means of sound as it warbles. And birds are fascinated with anything that is related to beautiful sound. When I pray by the house, the birds settle nearby to listen and twitter. They sort of go about their business, but they delight in hearing someone produce a positive sound. The main thing is not to look at them because they are very fearful. If you look at them, they immediately fly away. And if you take no notice, pretend as if they don't exist. Then they sit beside you and chirp the whole time whilst you pray. They are frightened by a stare. Don't look at them, and that's it, because they're quite fearful creatures. Then there are wild animals, such as hares. Place a hare next to a cat. You have never seen a hare with a cat next to it, have you? The hare has no emotions whatsoever. Conversely, the cat has a more developed consciousness. That is, it can smile, it can even flirt, which is a clear sign it has a more developed consciousness. Cats can even communicate. If you don't let it go somewhere, it scratches you, as though asking, "What's the matter?" And the hare just sits there and eats, that's all. It neither scratches you, nor does it communicate. If you have a hare as a pet, it just either eats or doesn't eat, that's all. It can feel fear, however, that it can do. And it can feel pleasure if you stroke it. But it has to eat something even at that time. Otherwise, there's no happiness. I mean, pets adopt consciousness from people. They are more evolved. There are wild animals that may be more developed. They are wolves, boars. But pigs are more developed than boars. Why so? Because they communicate with humans. And dogs are more evolved than wolves because they communicate with humans. Consciousness is transmitted from one living being to another. This is why a person becomes more evolved when they communicate with a mentor, a more evolved person. Thus, as animals' consciousness awakens, they gradually awake. Dogs sometimes fear their own reflection and bark at it, and then they realize that it is them. With the passage of time, they begin to recognize themselves in their reflection, so there is a development of consciousness. But no animal can be likened to a human, because animals' consciousness is asleep with dreams, whereas humans already have awakening consciousness. It is no longer asleep. You see, human beings already waken from their slumber, yet they still desire the same things. That is, they dream thinking, "I want to be happy, I want everything to be fine." These desires are the dreams a man has. "I want this kind of wife, to touch her this way and derive pleasure from that." A woman dreams as well. "I want to enjoy it when he touches me this way, otherwise why live with him if he doesn't satisfy me?" These are dreams akin to those that beasts have. All animals wish the same. And a man, while still entangled in these dreams, does not fully realize they are a human. They do not understand that they need to think higher. And our destiny is to grasp this, to learn to comprehend it. Because our consciousness is awakening, and there are 3 more stages ahead. The next stage is called awakened consciousness. It is when one begins to understand that there have been past lives. It is necessary to study the laws of God and live in rigorous accordance with them and have a mentor. Having a mentor is a sign of awakened consciousness. A man with awakened consciousness realizes that they are not God. They are a sinner, and therefore they need to have support from elders, from nature, and from kind people. That is, they are dependent on all that. Whereas a man with awakening consciousness reckons they can achieve everything on their own. That is the principal difference from a person with awakened knowledge. They realize their reliance on everything and endeavor to find their place, thereby developing humility. And then there's elevated consciousness. And if you say the word holy, it means elevated consciousness. A holy person is enlightened. They fully comprehend everything that is going on in this world. They have no doubts whatsoever about it. They understand clearly everything that happens around. Well, we cannot emulate holiness. A holy person's distinctive features are utter humility, absolute purity. They never perform profound actions. They never get out of balance. They are hugely compassionate and so forth. There are qualities of a holy person, and no matter what one pretends to be, the qualities of a holy person cannot be emulated. We cannot imitate them. And even lecturing does not mean sanctity. It's just professional skills, perhaps. Holiness is quite distinct. It is a very high level of consciousness, inaccessible for an ordinary person. People are already born this way. They ooze sanctity since their birth. Sergius of Radonezh observed fasts whilst being breastfed. On religious holidays, he did not suckle, but on the contrary, he fasted. We cannot imitate it. This is a very high level of personal development. Thus, we are all at different stages of development. Suppose you say to a man, "How could you do that? Do you have conscience?" Know that conscience manifests itself only in awakened consciousness. All other people get married, live together, they have goals, be it to build a house or to rear children. They love their motherland, they consider themselves believers. Well, there is a distinction between believing and considering oneself a believer. And yet they leave their loved ones saying, "I have finally met my true love. and now I'm not going to live with you, I'm going to live with them. You see, everything seemed fine, so what has impelled the person to do such a cruel thing? We are supposed to be close people, and yet there has been no intimacy. People can be close only when they have awakened consciousness. And genuine friendship can exist solely between such people. People who just live for the sake of their family, flattened children, do not have awakened consciousness. And that means that their conscience alternates between being awake and asleep. It's not that it's non-existent, it is present, but it doesn't function always, because such people are not developed enough yet. In order to have stability in your personal life, you must first develop, my darlings, and then you may lament, why has he left me so and so? Because that's how you have lived your life. You haven't lived to contemplate God and pray. On the contrary, you have lived for your children's sake, for your family's sake, and the like. And this is exactly the kind of existence that does not presuppose the presence of conscience, for conscience is connected to God. It is the energy of God, the very representation and embodiment of God. If a person has no conception of God, they have no contact with conscience. Conscience is transmitted through mentors, scriptures, and kind people. And when you were being abandoned, did you go to good people or to psychologists and astrologers? You see, if a person does not believe in good people, does not believe that God will reveal the truth through them, then they have no knowledge about conscience. You have to go to kind people who really love you, not just give in to you. A good person means awakened consciousness, meaning they are an evolved person, a believing person, a truly kind one. Because now and again, people say things that oughtn't to be said, such as, you're great, you're good, and they are a sleazebag. They are gone, and thank God. Well, this is not kindness. It's an insufficient level of development. Therefore, you must evolve. You must endeavor to plumb this world, this life, and that is the point of our conversations. But that doesn't apply solely to our conversations. There are such conversations in every temple, in every parish. There's so much depth to it all, and it is not necessary to know the subject of destiny in detail. Every person who strongly believes in God intuitively feels what fate is, and he will tell you the same thing, that you are suffering for your past sins. It's just that sometimes it's studied in depth and sometimes it's not. And perhaps there's no point in that detailed passing because you don't have to delve into it too much. The goal of human life is well defined. It is God and His service. Everything else can be studied by those who are interested in it, whereas those who are not do not have to squander their time on it. It is not that you, let's say, have studied the subject of fate in depth and have become a saint as a result. No, knowledge is necessary for those with restless minds. But if a person tells you, don't think too much, just concentrate on God, don't deem them to be stupid. That person is wise. They just know where to go and what not to waste their time on. Therefore, some faiths have a revealed and developed knowledge of how things work, whereas others do not pay too much attention to this, because they pay attention to the key thing in lieu, rather to prevent one from being distracted. There is no need to think that your faith is worse than any other faith because you don't learn much from it. Faith is like an arrow flying upwards. It is not meant to let you learn everything. This world is infinitely diverse and deep. You can't learn everything. Since you are here today, I am revealing to you what I know about it all. Thus, fate is connected to our past, and that past will always influence us in the present. Apart from that, there is deep past, which does not yet affect our present. It is destined for the future. Therefore, we do not know everything about ourselves. Many things are hidden from us. We don't know that just a small layer of fate is acting on us now. And there are many more things in the pipeline that will come into play somewhere further along the line. Only enlightened people have a rough idea of what is to come. They feel what destiny milestones they will have to experience, unlike every other human being. You see, there are so many people connected with fate who want to help you with it. Most often they only mislead you, and I will tell you how. Look, can a person's fate be seen from their horoscope? But horoscope is just a hint about fate. Horoscope is not person's fate. It is just a hint. Can you really choose a woman to marry based on the description of her features, let's say her height, weight, facial features? Can you, just as you choose your wife based on such features, similarly, a man's fate can be gleaned, explained, or foretold on the basis of their horoscope. It is extremely complicated, yet of old, in ancient culture, people could perceive a person's destiny. They just confirmed with a horoscope what they saw. But nowadays people have stopped seeing, so they just lump together everything they see in a horoscope. There is another problem with this. It lies in the fact that of old, only morally strong people were allowed to have access to this knowledge. One must first learn very well the laws of morality, and only then does one learn the laws of astrology. Let's say if a person doesn't know that no one can be told that their family will be ruined, that person can't be an astrologer. Because if you tell them that they have 2 marriages in their horoscope, you actually doom them to the destruction of their family, and that sin will rest on your shoulders, also your shoulders. Can you imagine how these witless dilettanti ruin their lives? They genuinely have no clue as to what they deal with, and they tell people utter rubbish like, your house will burn down, you have 2 marriages, you no longer need to buy an autumn coat and the like. Splendid. A man's fate is intended to be defeated. There is no other goal. All the blows of fate that befall us are merely obstacles to be surmounted. There are different hurdles, of course. Some can wreck one's life. That can happen too. But a man should not be told that they will definitely lose the battle, otherwise they will certainly lose. Supposing a man faces a battle and they are told, worry not, for you're going to lose anyway. That's complete rubbish, and it just makes you laugh because it's not even a joke. It's absolutely ludicrous. A man comes to fight and they are told, well, according to your fate, you're going to lose. What am I supposed to do then? Nothing, fight and perish. Wonderful help, simply superb. Doctor, am I going to live at all? Well, I wouldn't advise you so. Marvelous, that's amazing help. Thus, if you come to a fortune teller and they frighten you, that person is unqualified because they have no knowledge about how fate works. Fate is just something that strengthens and develops us. That's all. There's no other purpose. All the obstacles that arise are necessary for our development, and a man is given a burden that they can always bear, except when their burden is intended to terminate their destiny, because they cannot withstand it. There are 2 options. The first option is that a person begins to believe in God so much that God bestows grace upon them, thereby prolonging their life. And the second option, God will surely reveal to them that at this time their business here is drawing to a close and will comfort them in this matter. In other words, there is no injustice in this world. Sometimes we cope with our destiny, but sometimes we don't, so we will have to in the next life. In terms of our life, the subtle body does not die. It lives as long as we remain in the physical world. It does not die, and for this reason, it is, from this point of view, virtually everlasting. But within it, fate constantly changes and accumulates depending on our desires and actions. It changes and accumulates perennially. If you learned to remember yourself in the past, you wouldn't have any doubts. But one doesn't remember oneself in the past because everything is too familiar. In our dreams, we frequently see our past lives, but we don't realize it. We often see our past lives because we associate it with this life. It is often very difficult for a person to navigate their memory. People say memory is an illusion. Memory is not an illusion. It is a form of contact with some part of our reality. But since we are not aware of our reality at all, it is an illusion to us. Memory is always in contact with reality. It is never in contact with anything else. Memory is connected to fate. When a person recalls their life, there is a sound emanating from their fate. We cannot hear it. It is inaudible. We do not hear the sound of fate because it immediately evokes memories of itself. Thus, fate sounds in the human heart. Moreover, not only does it sound in our hearts, it also sounds in the hearts of our loved ones, and also in the heart of the plant manager, who, let's say, is your boss. My destiny binds me very tightly to all that is related to me. And depending on what I'm supposed to have, there's an unstoppable influence on all those people who are connected to me. An unstoppable, permanent influence. Not that they have an option. There is an option if they are a spiritually advanced person. Then they can give you their grace and not do whatever fate induces them to do to you. Well, let's say there was a woman here talking to me earlier, wasn't there? Which one of you in the front row was speaking with me? There you are, in the second row. Well, your fate is spurring you now to leave your husband. It's pushing you, compelling you to do it. But if you're a reasonable person, you can bestow grace upon him and not forsake him. But you'll have second thoughts about that afterwards. There will be a feeling in your heart, oh, why haven't I left him? It will be hard for you to resign yourself to the fact that you have made up your mind not to dump him, although it's a sin to leave a loved one, as a matter of fact. It's wrong. It destroys your destiny. But since he is supposed to experience it now, which is in line with his fate, you can't help leaving him. You want to do so. That's how his fate affects you at present. But it is also your fate, for God is testing you. You are a good person. God is trialing you to make you even better, which is the purpose of human life, after all, not to succumb to that urge. Some people say, but I can't, because it's evident that I have to leave that person. I can't live with them. It's not obvious that you have to leave, in fact. That desire is merely the influence of fate, that's all. It does not mean it is obligatory to act thus. Any desire is the influence of fate, which is how fate works. Everything we desire is the influence of either our own fate or the fate of those who are close to us, which is also our fate. Everything is our fate, and the fate of our loved ones is also woven into it. Their fate and our fate are entwined. Some people query, Oleg Gennadievich, whose fault is it that I'm ill, my mom's or dad's? This illness was earned by them in their past lives, and hence, they have received parents who also have this type of illness, so that it is all transmitted to you as well on the level of the subtle body, but it's not their fault. Now, if they cure themselves and help you cure yourself, it will be grace. But they are not to be blamed for your condition. The cause is in your past life. That's why an infant is born ugly and disabled, not because it's their mother's fault. She lived in the wrong way, her womb got compressed, and she had a birth trauma as a result. It's a fact that it was so, but that's how that child's fate affects them. For if a person cripples or mutilates someone in their past life, they are born disabled in this life. You see, fate is a very tough issue. It works pitilessly. Yet there is a certain option. So have you learned about astrologers? That there are mentors, highly evolved people, who, if they see destiny, be it even in your horoscope, tell you how to redeem it. And other than that, there's nothing else. Whatever they can reveal to you, they reveal it. However, if they can't, they do not disclose it because there's nothing to talk about. If you can't help a person, you'd best be silent. God will help them instead. Do you understand it? If you say something you can't rectify yourself, it's a curse, because the person trusts you. Don't listen to such people. If an obstacle has arisen in your life after your visit to a seer, which they have not helped you resolve, raise your hand who has experienced it, then that person is unqualified. Don't listen to them and don't take seriously what they have said. Although there may be a grain of truth in it, it's only a grain of truth which oughtn't to be heeded. Know that seeing one's destiny is truly possible only when you are capable of overcoming it. For example, if you are allowed to foresee a particular event, it means you can get over it. And if you are incapable of getting over this event, you won't see it, because contact with a particular event can only come through victory over it. In other words, a person who can defeat their fate sees events and tells you how to win immediately. And those people who talk about future events and can't surmount them, but still talk, they're always mistaken, because that's not how the vision of fate generally works. Therefore, never trust people who frighten you, especially those fortune tellers. Those are generally low-grade options. They do sense destiny, but they sense it through spirits. You see, there are such evil spirits that sense destiny, and they always set a person up for fright. Because when a person is frightened, they connect with this evil spirit, and thus the person becomes hooked and mentally ill as a result. For this purpose, it is enough to petrify them and introduce in their consciousness a super valuable idea. The same spirits act likewise through various psychological techniques. For instance, if you have switched to holotropic breathing, have begun to breathe sharply in order to perceive your fate. You have an idea and an attitude, and you, having breathed for a while, behold something all at once. Know that at this time, as one is weakened by frequent breathing, a spirit enters one's mind, whose aim is to show them something that will bind them to that spirit in the end. a person begins to believe that they have beheld their past life. But know this, seeing your past life is a reward, and you can't buy it cheap. I was in Jagannath Puri once, and people sold coral there and said they had derived it themselves from the sea. I went to a stone specialist afterwards and showed them the coral. He said, first of all, coral is not mined in Jagannath Puri, just so you know. And secondly, no one will ever sell authentic coral cheap, particularly if they have mined it themselves, as it has its own price. And that's how I learned about stones, that no precious stones are cheap because there are no fools. The same applies to fate. The Lord will not reveal knowledge about your destiny cheaply, for this knowledge is indeed a clear sign of one's profound development. And this knowledge is also a blessing. A man cannot learn more than they are supposed to know. Therefore, don't meddle in this issue. Don't go to those fortune tellers, for they will only scare you, and that's all. It is better to go to a sage so that they bless you, for blessing is the power that changes destiny, even though you don't know what that change will be. Thus, fate is related to the influence of time. What is time? Time is a force that affects both the subtle body and the gross body, but it does not affect the soul. The soul has an everlasting nature and does not perish under the influence of time. We are souls, we are absolutely immortal. We have a psychical body, or a subtle body, as the Vedas explain, which lives with us just because we dwell here in the material world. We must know that we are denizens of the spiritual world, not the material world. I reiterate, we are inhabitants of the spiritual world, not the material world. There is neither subtle body nor fate there in the spiritual world. There is the spiritual body and fight of living beings who dwell in the spiritual world, the ever-increasing happiness we rave about. That desire of ours to have ever more happiness all the time is precisely what life in that timeless abode is, in a spiritual body. But as for the material world, there is less and less happiness all the time. I mean natural happiness. When a person is born, they have a lot of natural happiness. There is plenty of natural happiness emanating from a baby. Hence, all people adore babies. If a baby is placed here now, you won't look at me. Your attention will be drawn to that baby. Why? Because more happiness emanates from them than from me. That's all. It's very simple. They feel this happiness themselves, so they are happy they were born. But if a sick elderly woman is placed here, you won't look at her. Your gaze will be drawn to me because I'm younger. Thus, a man craves happiness in this world. We all yearn for happiness. But we live for knowledge and we receive happiness as a reward always. For the knowledge we acquire for starting to live in the right way. There is another kind of happiness that comes by itself in this life, and you don't have to wait for it and dream about it. The happiness that is due to a man according to their fate comes from the heart by itself. And you don't have to wait for it or dream about it, because it will come by itself anyway, and it will go away by itself. And so just leave it alone. If you want to live happily, then aspire for something that doesn't come by itself. It comes through personal development. Everything that has to do with our desires, let's say a girl wants to get married, it comes by itself because you are a girl. You were born a girl, so you'll have a husband, will give birth to a baby. Now you will claim that not all girls get married and not all girls have children. Yes, that means there are hurdles to overcome. However, if you're born a girl and you evolve as a person, you get over that hurdle and you get married in the end. And then you get over another hurdle and have children. But if you carry on waiting all the time, then you won't overcome anything, because foul fate is not transcended through waiting. It is transcended solely through progress when one evolves as a person. Waiting alone does not help. People who wait for good life to come, wondering when will it finally come, they just waste their time, because the answer is never. Either fight with your fate and defeat it or settle down. Thus, time influences the gross body. It ages the gross body in two ways. The first way is gradual, very slow aging, and this way suits everyone. So if, let's say, I naturally leave this body, die is not an appropriate word, because I will be still alive, it's a deception. That is, if I leave this body at the age of 85 or 90 naturally, it means that this gradual aging has taken effect. And this will be suitable for me. And for every person as well, I'm sure. Why? Because it's normal to live 85 years. If somebody tells you 150 years is normal, you'll say, come on, stop it, 85, 90 is all right. We know how long this gradual aging lasts, we all do. And so people are largely satisfied. Do you agree? It's all right to live this long, isn't it? Gradual aging suits everyone. However, cyclic aging does not. It turns out that there are also cycles of influence on the gross body, which induce very serious problems in it. Let's say I lead a healthy lifestyle. The day before yesterday, I ran 15 kilometers. I felt great. Today, I've dived into an ice hole 3 times, so that I have the strength to give you a lecture. In other words, I lead a healthy living, but last November, my strength waned. Both physical strength and mental power faded all at once, and the gemstones I wear stopped helping me. And they even started to strain me. So I took them all off altogether because they made me feel unwell. Only jogging, fasting, and other forms of asceticism helped me. All the rest did not help, and artificial methods didn't work, and I intensified my prayer. It was very hard for me to pray at that time. I warned all my friends and acquaintances not to rely on me, because I didn't have sufficient strength even for myself. And at that time, my father passed away in December. Why? Because I could no longer give him strength. I didn't have enough even for myself. I couldn't do anything about it, even though I had been practicing it all my life. I wasn't harmed too much. I survived and aided him. I later prayed for him and felt, as I prayed, that he was undergoing certain transformations. I prayed ceaselessly even in my sleep. For a couple of days I wouldn't cease to pray. Somehow I even continued the prayer in my sleep, although I was actually asleep. It was amazing to see. God granted to me an opportunity to pray even in my sleep. Well, only for a couple of days. Not that I was capable of doing so all the time. When I was in dire need, God aided me. I'm not going to tell you in detail what I saw happening to my father. This is very confidential information for me. I tell a lot of things, and I have been criticized for it. People say he boasts. Well, I don't want to divulge this information to you because it is very confidential. But anyway, sometime later I felt better. I began to recover. It's not like everything is over now because you feel bad. It doesn't mean it's forever. That's what people are often inclined to think. Well, let's say I've been feeling unwell for 2 months. That's it, I'm done then, isn't it? It's a cycle, it is cyclical influence. Then you'll regain your strength again when this cycle passes. But if you don't bother about your health during this cycle, it may happen that this cycle will knock you out for a while. And you've been recovering for years. Or it can inflict so much damage on you that you won't be able to revive. That's what it's all about. Try to understand that these cycles are serious trials in our lives. There are 3 forces that prolong your life and offset this cyclical influence. And all the people who don't practice these 3 things are just bone idle and have no wish to live a long life. That's all. Or they have no knowledge about that. In most cases, both statements are true. Thus, first is fasting on water. It does not necessarily have to be dry fast on water. Fasting cleanses subtle psychical channels, and it is the influence of time that clogs these subtle channels, thereby creating chronic conditions, the cyclical influence of time on the gross body. It is treated by means of fasting. That is, fasting counteracts this influence, putting it off. Time can't cope with fasting. So, when you fast, the subtle energy that should take your life no longer has the ability to do so. I'm not referring to those cases when this is irreversible and inevitable. It is another topic. In most cases, it is otherwise. Most frequently, a person dies prematurely on account of living in the wrong way. This is the inference I have drawn on the basis of what I observe in myself and in other people. I have studied it firsthand. I see how the subtle body works, particularly when I run. Why do I run 15 kilometers? Because I can witness the purifying effect it has on the subtle body. I sit as long in a steam bath or sauna as it takes for the subtle body to get purged, because I am capable of seeing it happen. There are 4 layers in the subtle body. When I run for 15 minutes, or about 18 minutes to be precise, my body just starts to purge itself of the effects of time. In the next 20 minutes, the first layer is purified, which is already 38 minutes of running. That is what it takes to purify the first layer of the subtle body. This means that I shall not suffer from skin diseases, severe conditions of the digestive system, mucous membranes, the lymphatic system, cancer of the lymphatic system. Capillaries in the body will not suffer either. I shall not suffer from allergies, and so on. Thus, within the first 38 minutes of running, the first layer of the subtle body is cleansed. The second layer is purged within the next 20 minutes, which means that it takes 58 minutes of running to purge 2 layers of the subtle body. The third layer is purified after 1 hour and 18 minutes of running, and consequently, after 1 hour and 38 minutes of running, all 4 layers are eventually purged. In this time, I managed to cover 15 kilometers. Thus, I must run for approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes, so as to purify all 4 layers of the subtle body. That's the price of life, do you realize it? If I do not run, my active longevity will come to an end at the age of 64. As a rule, everyone's life ends at that age, because that's when severe conditions afflict people, and then a person meets their demise. When I run a distance of 15 kilometers, I extend my active life to 86 years, thereby increasing life expectancy and achieving longevity. 22 years. Yet, I can only run such distances once every 5 or 6 days. Otherwise, my body will wear out, thus decreasing life expectancy. And I couldn't run that long from the outset. I lengthened the distance for 2.5 years, little by little, because I realized it was vital for my longevity. I started with 500 meters only, which made me breathless. Likewise, 2.5 days of fasting cleanses the subtle body thoroughly and prolongs life. Similarly, 1.5 hours of static body position prolongs life. There are 3 types of aging that time inflicts on a person. The first type of aging is called body tension. There are 2 types of tension. One stiffens a person so that they cannot move, whereas the other one induces pain in the joints, in the spine, in the intestines, and in the head. That is, all kinds of pain are caused by tension. Moreover, mental disorder is also indicative of tension. There are 3 levels of tension. The first one is just stiffness and faint pains in the body. The second one manifests itself in chronic diseases such as polyarthritis, gastritis, or rather stomach cramps, headaches, and so forth. And the third level of tension leads to stroke, heart attack, and schizophrenia. This is the final stage of development of this tension. That is, time in this way claims the life of a person by means of tension. If a person, even a child, has a mental illness, it means they have the third level of tension. Such conditions as cerebral palsy and autism are indicative of the third level of tension. And tension is eliminated only in 2 ways: by means of prolonged continuous movement, which should be calm and smooth, and also by means of prolonged motionless body position. This must be done in a good mood, because a person does not absorb the forces that defeat tension being in a foul frame of mind. These forces are found in nature. For instance, you may say, I suffer from polyarthritis and I have back pain. I suffer from headaches and I have cramps. I have post-stroke condition and the like. All this can only be cured by prolonged movement and static body positions, that's all. Because these 2 actions give the body the strength to overcome this kind of time influence. The second type of time influence increases heat in the body. This results in inflammatory diseases, which later turn into stomach ulcer and chronic inflammations. And finally, this heat in the body leads to rheumatism, tuberculosis, into non-specific ulcerative colitis and other conditions. Severe inflammation in the body are the third stage of the effects of heat. This heat in the body is removed by static body positions and fasting. These 2 types of ascetic actions eliminated, as a result, a person cools down. Greens also help. Green leaves and herbs remove heat in the body. Let's say a person has diabetes. This indicates there is heat in their body. Greens, static body positions, and fasting on water eliminate heat in the body and prolong a person's life. Whoever has diabetes or asthma, they have heat in their body. Allergies and skin diseases are also caused by heat in the body. And the third type of aging is when a person first has toxins, a sore throat, or is overweight. It's all the same. On second stage, there is a benign tumor, and on third stage, a malignant tumor. All of that is cured by means of fasting and prolonged continuous movement. Thus, 3 kinds of ascetic actions combat 3 types of human aging, but they all have to be combined. Combined of 2. Let's say tumors are cured by prolonged continuous movement plus fasting. Tension is eliminated by prolonged continuous movement plus static exercises. Heat is removed by static exercises plus fasting. As you see, 3 kinds of ascetic actions counteract the 3 types of aging of the body. the cyclical aging of the body, which is the reason why people die most frequently. Now you will ask me, who will live long, Oleg Gennadievich? The person who is eager to practice these three kinds of austerities, in spite of their drowsiness, desire to lie in bed, and absence of time to run, will live long. It's you, Oleg Gennadievich, who has plenty of time, but I have no time to run, you may reply. Splendid, you have time to go on a date or watch nonsense films. However, there is no time to run, because there is no knowledge, that's all. Thus, the person who has said to himself or has been told by a doctor, let's say they go to see a doctor and the doctor says, as from now you can't walk much because your joints are sore and you won't cure them. Now you have to live on medication for the rest of your life, walking slowly. And so walk slowly until you begin to relieve yourself in bed. This man will not help you. They have no conception of health and of victory over fate. If a person's joints are inflamed, they must walk slowly for a very long time until they can walk fast. This is how they overcome the disease of the joints. And they must stand still for a long time as well, until this illness relents. Two kinds of ascetic actions treat all the joints, all the headaches and everything else. And there is no need to think there's anything else. Everything else helps. Let's say you've been prescribed some herbs, leeches, acupuncture, stones, or homeopathy. Whatever you may hear or learn about that treatment, it all just balances the energy in the body. However, one must practice the three kinds of ascetic actions so as to acquire the energy and power to surmount their fate. And if you lack that energy, this treatment won't be of any assistance to you. It will be of no avail, useless. When we started treating people, we noticed that at some point our treatment ceases to be effective. People get overwhelmed by it. And we realized later why. Because people lack these three kinds of ascetic actions. The battery runs out of charge owing to the treatment, and that's it. And a person cannot heal any further unless they recharge it. Have you learned about the fate that affects the gross body? Now let us move on to the fate that affects the psyche. It also has two types of aging. The first type of aging is when, well, a little kid has few bad events happening per unit of time. Conversely, an adult has much more than that. This is what the aging of the subtle body is. That is, the older a person becomes, the more frequently troubles befall them. That's why elderly people tend to mutter interminably. Why do they mutter and grumble? Because they can't tolerate the influence of time anymore. What's the point of all this? The human psyche is designed for self-development. If a person develops as a personality, they are able to digest mentally all these difficulties in their life that keep multiplying with age. They are capable of surmounting it. Therefore, the older a person is, the more they ought to pray and wish everyone happiness. These are austerities for the mind. There are ascetic practices for the body that prolong life, and there are ascetic practices for the mind, which make a person conscious, so that they do not become senile and witless by old age. Why do people get senile dementia? Because this hard fate accumulates and the psyche can no longer cope with it. It's not that cholesterol has accumulated. High levels of cholesterol is something that happens subsequently. When the subtle body does not move properly, then all manner of illnesses ensue, because the subtle body or the psyche controls health. It has both mental health and physical health under control. And in the course of our life, difficulties escalate as the influence of fate intensifies. And if a person does not forgive, does not give other people happiness or forgiveness, asceticism aimed at serving others, self-deprivation, prayer, these are natural ways of purging the psychical body from the difficulties of fate. If a person does not engage in such ascetic practices, but just works, lives as usual, then their psyche undoubtedly gets ever tenser and heavier, which further results in depression or some kind of psychopathic disorders, insomnia, insurmountable feeling of offense, stress, extreme emotionality, nervousness, and so forth. This all means that the person does not cope with their fate, and they won't be capable of doing it unless they start living in the right way. And that means that the goal of human life is to learn to live in the right way, rather than to learn to have a good salary, or to learn to rear children or dwelling. But learning how to live right, life will inevitably compel you to do it, and there is also cyclical influence of fate on the psyche. For instance, I don't love my husband anymore. It's an example of cyclical effects of fate on the subtle body. People have a propensity to think, that's it, it's forever. And then, when she has already forsaken her husband, 6 months later, she begins to love him again later. Yet, he is already with someone else. Sheesh, what's the matter? I'm having ill luck. It's not that you are unfortunate. You just have no knowledge about how fate works. Today you don't love your husband, but tomorrow you love him again. This is how fate works. Do not trust those thoughts and feelings brought about by fate. They mislead you. Oh, it's over. I've been feeling a chill in my heart for my husband for 2 years. Raise your hand who has transmitted this thought to me. This period is drawing to a close in your case. There is no chill anymore. Another period is already coming to replace it. Have you dumped him yet? Not yet? You're lucky. It's warming up again in a month. It's already warming up. It's better than half a year ago. My good ones, it's good to know, very good to know indeed, what awaits you. Only happiness, only joy and victory over your fate awaits all of you, for you are willing to progress. You are the unique people of this city, and only happiness awaits you. Raise your hand, those who have already become happier than you were a year ago. You will become even happier, incomparably happier. You can't even envisage how much happier you all will be. For you are on the right track in your life. This is what awaits us. Do not believe in anything else. You are the masters of your own destiny. Indeed, you are the masters of your destiny. Your horoscope is your inevitable future victory over fate. That's all. There are no other horoscopes for your life. Just remember that you must carry on progressing. Keep going. Do not surrender. There are several ways to break down. The first way, a person gets entangled in a vortex of events and stops progressing. It can either be profound suffering or immense happiness. This is the first way to ruin a person's life, when intense suffering or intense happiness befalls them. Be it a vortex of great joy or a vortex of profound woe. And the second way of ruining one's life is through an insult. Do not insult your motherland. Do not insult elders. Do not insult anyone's faith. Do not insult any person who behaves wrongly in life, because any insult destroys a person's life. Because this is how we try to fulfill the role of God. We act as though we were God. We say, come on, if I were you, I would. God says, we shall let you be in their shoes, don't worry. Let us see what happens to you next. Thus, these are the ways to ruin oneself. Have you memorized what I have just told you? If there is too much happiness, don't succumb to it. Go forth. If there is too much suffering, do not surrender. And never insult anyone. Never read gossip about anyone on the internet. Remember, progress means seeing more and more purity, rather than seeing more and more filth. As some people say, I have engaged in this spiritual practice and have beheld all the filth there. Good for you, you haven't wasted your time. Thus moving forward. Now we shall delve deeper into the subject. So what is fate? Fate is simply learning. That is, having all this influence of time on the gross body and on the subtle body is necessary for us to become stronger and happier after all. There is no other purpose of all this. But fate is a completely logical pattern at the same time. And fate has certain laws as to how it works. It sounds right here in our hearts. It sounds not only for us, but for other people as well. Fate works through memory. For instance, a woman says, Oleg Gennadievich, I pray, think about God and I forget about myself. But then all of a sudden some trivial domestic event comes to my heart. I explain that it is not a domestic event. It's just that fate compels you to think about yourself. It intrudes into your prayer, and your aim is to force yourself to think about God. And as fate keeps interfering, you continue to force yourself to think about God. And this is called victory over one's fate. It is in the memory. If a person constantly strives to remember God, but simultaneously their fate compels them to remember something else, it is a struggle for their happiness. You need to switch, is that clear? You may say, I'm not thinking about myself, I'm thinking about my son. Remember that thinking about your son is actually thinking about yourself. Because you search for happiness in your son, and that is your happiness therefore. A woman lives the fate of her loved ones. She doesn't live her own fate. So, you oughtn't to think even about your son. You must think about God, and then your son will feel better. For it is essential to know. When one thinks of God, they are filled with the power of victory over fate. And God distributes this energy himself through all our intangible strings at his discretion. He knows who to give to and how much, but we don't. Therefore, you oughtn't to meddle in it. You don't have to think about anybody. I want to help my son. Or maybe you have to think about something else right now. Perhaps there is something more important. You don't know it, so don't meddle in it. Think about God. Fill yourself with this spiritual power. And God will be the one to distribute all the energy and power. And you will even know how. Because once you have prayed, you will notice that your son seems to feel better. You will feel it in your heart that it's easier for you to think about him. It means that you are defeating his fate. It all happens in memory. If you, having prayed for your child, remember them and feel as if they should be feeling somewhat better, although that there has not been any noticeable improvement yet, but you feel they should be feeling slightly better, this means that you are already at the first stage of getting over your fate. The first stage is in memory. Thus, there are 3 stages of approaching one's fate and 3 stages of transcending it. The first stage of approaching it means, I no longer think someone is to be blamed for my life. It means that I'm about to get closer to defeating my fate. Now, in this case, I do not defeat my fate. Let's say my husband has left me. I reckon he's to blame for everything in my life. I'm lonely, miserable. It means that fate has overpowered me. What does fate do? It makes us think that it is someone's or something's fault. For instance, I live in the wrong country. That's why I suffer. It means that fate has overpowered you. You do not suffer because you live in the wrong country. On the contrary, you're in the right country. You're just not aware of the fact that you need to accept that fate, not reject it. You don't know that yet. And when you accept it, you'll prosper right here in this country. When a person surmounts their own fate, they always experience happiness wherever they are, irrespective of circumstances. Even in a spot where no one around them is happy, they will still be happy, because they have overcome their fate. How will it happen? God will arrange it. I'll even tell you more than that. If you pray for your country, you will see it develop and flourish. And everything that is connected to you, all your unseen threads, they will begin to develop. And everything related to other people will remain as it was, because you have your own destiny in this country. If you pray for the country gives you the opportunity to progress, regardless of the fact it is generally going through a bad period. But the foul period is coming to an end in your country. Once again, I repeat that a good period has begun. Development is underway. You just don't see it now. It's hidden from view at first, and then it becomes evident. That's why everyone who leaves from here now, they predominantly relocate to the west. That's where a foul period is looming. Where should a poor peasant go, right? There are miserable people. They think they need to leave, and then it will be easier. Look how their thinking works. Fate acts always in a wave-like manner. When you hit rock bottom, it means there will be some improvement before long. But people think, we cannot bear it anymore. Let's get out of here. And off they go. Where? To a place that it's in its prime. It means it's going to deteriorate further along the line. How long do they live there, in that country? As long as it keeps getting worse and worse there, rolling towards the bottom. Then they say, now we have to get out of here. However, there is already some improvement on the cards in that place. And where do they head? To a place that is already at the height of its development, so there will be a downturn there before long. And where do they live all the time? They are always in decline. It's a marvelous life, isn't it? What you need to do is to wait a little, that's all. There is a Chinese saying, if you don't know how to defeat your foe, wait a little while until his corpse floats past you in the river. Because if a person is hostile towards everyone, they will find someone to fight with and someone who will beat them. Why would you want to do that? If a person is an adversary, they behave badly, why would you want to do that? Wait a little while, someone else will deal with them. That's all. Likewise, there is an upswing in this country right now. Whoever decides to leave, they will encounter a downswing where they end up. You see, you may say, Oleg Gennadievich, I've already made up my mind, we'll see. Of course you will see. It's your life, so you will see. That's why we're studying this subject now, for it's your life and you'll have to deal with it. I do not mind someone leaving. That is all right too. I'm just talking about how fate works. Sometimes a person may be better off elsewhere, as an exception. In a place that is in decline, that can also be true. Let us move on now. Fate is like a road that a person walks on. There are 3 ways of moving. There is movement in the mode of ignorance, which means I only want happiness. I don't wish to hear anything about any fate. Why should I listen to you? You're preaching some nonsense. You just need to be happy, you know? I like drinking, so I drink. A little alcohol is beneficial. Many dissertations have been written on this topic as a matter of fact. I enjoy having sex, so I have sex. Now with whom? That's none of your business. Maybe you suffer from impotence. That's why you insist on someone having sex only with their own wife. This is called life in the mode of ignorance. When a person lives in the mode of ignorance, they crawl along their fate. They have a path to go, but they crawl along it, because they are loath to know what the purpose of human life is. They decide themselves what the purpose of their life is. They don't learn, don't take any notice of the examples of others, don't study scriptures. They only want to live as they desire, that's all. They exclaim, "Don't tell me how to live my life." Ilochka the cannibal, a film character, had a catchphrase, "Don't teach me to live, fellow." This is life in the mode of ignorance. And in this case, such a person doesn't need to have a horoscope made for them. Because in the horoscope, everything will be better than it actually is. In other words, the horoscope for them is just fantasy, for their life will be harder. The intelligence of people who live in the mode of ignorance becomes dull. They roll into the abyss of their fate. It's not that their fate works thus. Degradation is not fate. Fate is trials that befall someone in their life. If a person abuses alcohol, or if they languish in prison, that's not fate. It means they can't handle their fate. It means they have the wrong lifestyle, the wrong way of thinking, the wrong goals in life. I have an acquaintance who was also plagued by fate. Well, I'll give myself a little credit now, begging your pardon. I told him, "Don't drive, you will kill someone." Yet, he started driving anyway. And he killed a child unintentionally. She ran onto the road herself, leaving him with no time to react. She dashed under the wheels and met her demise. He stood trial and was sentenced to 4 years in jail. He is a very good man. His parents paid a bribe and the case was closed. He went with me, helping me with the lectures. He became my assistant. We traveled together for a few years giving lectures. But fate always pursues and finds a person. Once he went to his hometown to renew his travel document in order to go to India with me afterwards to visit shrines. He needed to renew his passport and obtain a visa. One day he went to a shop to buy a loaf of bread. However, his outfit matched that of a dangerous criminal that was wanted. He was detained on the street and ordered to show his documents. And he happened to have his passport with him. It turned out that the lawyer who handled his case had been imprisoned for bribery, and all the cases he had closed had been reopened. In other words, he wouldn't have been searched for if he hadn't been caught. But there he came himself. They checked him, and it turned out that he was on the wanted list. So they immediately arrested him and took him into custody. He didn't even have a chance to return home. His mom asked, "Where are you?" He answered, "I'm in custody." He was condemned to a prison spell of 4 years. And so he went to teach convicts spiritual and moral values. Because he had been studying my lectures and assisting me. Once in jail, he began to pray constantly, living righteously, waking up early, performing ablutions and so on. And therefore he was nicknamed Saint there. And people started going to him for good counsel on how to live, because he apparently was an extraordinary person. He spent entire days counseling convicts. Then the officers requested him to give a lecture on a healthy lifestyle to all the prisoners. He gave this lecture to the prisoners and thus earned their esteem as he spoke kindly. Then, by a general vote, he was transferred to the medical unit. Later, he fell under the first amnesty, and his sentence was halved to 2 years. Then he fell under the second amnesty. His sentence was halved again, leaving him with 1 year only. And then he was paroled from prison alongside Afghan war veterans. Thus, he served only 8 months in jail. During all this time, I was in India studying scriptures. When I went to Almaty to give lectures, he had just been released on parole from prison. And so he came to help me, as I needed him greatly. Thus, he was in prison whilst I was in India studying scriptures. Afterwards, we continued to travel together. This was 20 years ago. The man was supposed to serve 4 years in prison, but because he lived virtuously, he was left with only 8 months out of those 4 years. This is how fate works. Don't think that fate means you'll be tortured until the end. Fate yields to a person who lives righteously. Understand this. I know many purely extraordinary cases. One woman in Almaty during that trip 20 years ago came up to me and said, I'm in a situation where I'll either be killed or go to prison. I have these two options. What would you advise? I said, let's get a better understanding of what's going on. She responded, I borrowed a large amount of money from a very influential person. I was sure everything would work out, but I went bankrupt. And that person told me, either pay me back or I'll make you go to prison. I don't know what to do. You need to pray, I answered. She asked, what should I pray about? There are only two options. I said, pray, maybe there is a third option. And she began to pray. Long did she pray. I was for a month in Almaty giving lectures. Having prayed for 3 weeks, she came to me and said, God has given me an option. I want to hear your counsel. And she confided to me that she had felt in her heart she should approach that person and offer to become their manager, because they were in the same field. I shall work for you as your manager. Provide me with some money so that I can scrape out a living whilst taking the rest of my income to pay off the debt. I responded, well, that's what God has revealed to you. That's exactly how it will be in the end. She asked, will they agree to this? I answered, 100% they'll agree. But she felt uncomfortable even approaching them. I told her what my sergeant in the army used to say, it's only uncomfortable to sleep on the ceiling because the blanket falls. And so she went to talk to that person, and they assented to her proposal. But the most curious part was when I visited Almaty again 2 years later. She told me that this person had bought her a flat and had forgiven her all her debts, asking her to work for them and not to go anywhere else. I shall protect you through all the difficulties in your life, they said, for she had significantly boosted their business. Do you see how a person's fate turned around just because she had prayed to God? Another case happened at this year's Blagost festival. A man came to the festival. Initially, I thought he was from the Federal Security Service of Russia. Sometimes such people come to the festival and they are quite conspicuous. So I thought it was another one from the FSB to monitor the festival. I wished him happiness and everything was all right. As it turned out, he was not from the FSB. Nonetheless, he was a high-ranking individual. After my lecture, he approached me and said, I'm in a difficult situation. I am facing imprisonment. As we began to scrutinize the situation, it turned out he had made a big mistake in life that he was unconscious of. The mistake was believing that the truth he knew was above a person. He began to undermine their position, as he felt the leader managed things incorrectly, which was indeed the case. I explained to him that God appoints people to their positions, wherefore we mustn't harm them, as it is a sin. It's better to pray for them and help them improve, for when we harm our elders, everything around us tumbles down. And he confirmed, indeed, had I done that, the whole factory would have been in jeopardy. In the end, they decided to jail him. You know, when some powerful people want to put someone behind bars, they do it. I explained to him, have you realized your mistake? You need to act differently. You can't put the truth above a person. The person is above the truth. You need to help the person, not push your own truth. Mutinies only destroy people's lives. He grasped everything and began to pray to God. He said to me, I pray, but is there any point? They've already decided to incarcerate me. I replied, keep praying. And we began a collective prayer. The entire Blagost festival prayed together for an hour. An hour later, he sped to me and said, I feel lightness in my heart, just as you said, as if nothing is going to happen at all. I said to him, now wait for a phone call. He asked, from whom? I answered, from those people. Indeed, I'm expecting a call from them shortly. And what should I say to them? Tell them the whole truth, that you've repented of your actions, understood your mistake, and want to continue working for them. Ask them not to imprison you. He said, Oleg Gennadyevich, you're a good person, but those people don't believe in fairy tales. And he added, I can do as you bid me, of course, but it sounds ludicrous to me. I would never fall for such words. I responded, just do it, that's all. He said, well, fine. I hoped I could avoid humiliation. They phoned him and he said those words. Then there was a minute of silence on the other end, and then he was told, all right, we shan't send you to prison, keep working. Thus, he avoided imprisonment and retained his position. Can you imagine that? Just because he had prayed. Although it was very difficult for him to comprehend that it had happened by virtue of prayer. because it's very challenging to perceive a link between such things when a person lacks experience. So, the first stage of approaching victory over fate is that I don't believe that my fate is someone else's fault. It's my fate's fault. The second stage of approaching victory over fate is understanding that it's not my fate's fault, but it's my fault. It's my fault that I live here, that I have this government, that everything happens the way it does. By the way, I don't think you have a bad government. I'm conveying your viewpoint. I think you actually have a superb government given the situation the country is currently in. It copes with the pressure and problems. The country is slowly starting to develop. That's my personal opinion. You could give me 1,000 arguments, but I'm speaking my mind. And you have your own fate, which you perceive differently. Things appear to be different when you look at them from another angle. Now, the third stage of approaching victory over fate is that neither my fate nor I am at fault, but rather everything will be fine in the end. All these three stages of approaching victory over fate cannot be achieved by a person's own efforts. Try to accept your life right away just as it is, where you live and how you live. It's not that easy. Why? Because there is no strength. This is called the power of the soul. This power is derived from sanctity. There are three types of victory energy over fate. The first type is when a person performs ascetic practices for the body. The natural elements that provide health to a person and charge the batteries of our fate enter us. The sun gives vitality, good immunity, good digestion, good substance assimilation, good eyesight, and so on. The earth provides calmness, good sleep, hormonal functions for women. It also removes inflammatory processes. Fresh air gives concentration, good attention span, good working capacity, a robust body, strong muscles, good physique, and so forth. Water provides harmony, kindness, good metabolism, the ability to interact with other people, to embrace nature, and the like. All these energies are derived from ascetic practices. For instance, if I lie in the sun, I receive solar energy. To receive solar energy, you need to move in the sun and wish everyone happiness, then it will enter you. But if you just expose your bottom to it, the sun won't like that. As higher energies also have a sense of propriety. That's why of old people knew they oughtn't to turn their bottom to the sun. Like Sukhov, a character from a Soviet film, said, "Don't go there, don't do it. Do not insult the sun. You might think it is inanimate, be that as it may, you oughtn't to turn your bottom to it. Revere the energy of joy it radiates. Or do you want joy to enter you that way? You had best let it enter your heart." Thus, all these elements fill a person with health. Similarly, people fill a person with social power. Do you understand that people provide a person with social power? If you can't get married, people can lend you a hand, but you must take care of all of them. When a woman forgets about herself whilst taking care of others, she blossoms, thus becoming more beautiful in a different sense of beauty. It's not the kind of beauty that you create by slapping on some makeup. This kind of beauty attracts men, that's a fact. But it only sexually arouses them rather than boosting their desire to marry. When a woman cares more and more about all people, she develops that kind of beauty which makes men want to marry her. Similarly, when a person enjoys labor, let's say they delight in working somewhere, and so they work, forgetting about money. Of course they need money, but it becomes secondary to them as their primary focus is doing something for everyone. So in this case, they create favorable fate to find a good job. That's how it works. People become content with their work. Employers also seek such extraordinary employees. Who of you provide jobs to people? Raise your hands. Let me tell you, you dream of people who are eager to work, aren't you? Right. The rest of you should become such people, and you'll instantly get a job. Employers are always desperate for people who are keen to work. If you want to climb the social ladder, know this. All bosses are on the lookout for a trustworthy person they can rely on. And they will see this reliability in your eyes. They will see that you perceive purity in them, the will of God in your boss. If they see that you perceive the will of God in them, they will appoint you where you need to be, for the energies of God work in this way. A person who does something for others receives all kinds of social happiness, namely fame, money, marriage, even children. People provide all these types of social happiness. God works through people. It's not people themselves who provide this social happiness, but God works through them. Similarly, God grants all types of victory over fate, such as healing from cancer, an end to loneliness, unemployment, and poverty. All these types of challenges of fate are surmounted through direct contact with God in the form of faith and service to Him. Your fate begins to soften, just like bread softens in water. Stale bread, as hard as a rock, is not easy to chew. But if you soak it in water, it becomes soft and can be eaten without a problem. Likewise, faith is as hard as a rock, but when a person prays, it softens, and then it can be defeated without a problem. So, when you feel that everything will be fine, it means that your prayer has already led you to the beginning of victory over fate. There will be 3 more stages ahead. The first stage, not just when everything is fine, but when your heart becomes light. It's when you feel lightness in your heart. For example, your husband has forsaken you, but you feel lightness in your heart. Not that you want to go to someone else already, no. You strive to bring your husband back, and you feel light in your heart. Raise your hand if this has happened to someone. This is the first stage of victory over fate. There are 2 more stages left. Despite the lightness in your heart, your husband doesn't return. Why? Because this is just the first stage of victory over fate. Changes have happened so far only to you, but not to him. Further, you pray for a long time. The second stage is lengthy. As your heart becomes filled with happiness little by little, you feel light. And the intangible thread between you and your husband, which has been filled by fate with loathsome energy, gets purged of all the filth. The second stage of victory over fate starts there. It means you have the ability to communicate with him, but he doesn't have it yet. You phone him asking, "How are you?" He responds, "I don't know." You say, "Everything is all right." You begin to befriend him. Gradually the thread gets cleansed, and then, all of a sudden, he says, "Let's be friends." You answer, "Sure," although he lives with another woman, cheating on you on a daily basis. And yet you acquire the strength to befriend him. Can you imagine this miracle? Before, you couldn't even listen to him. You would shake because he had betrayed you. And now you can chatter with him about the weather, about the children, calmly, kindly. Raise your hands if this has happened to someone. This is the second stage of victory over fate. Finally, at the third stage, changes occur in your husband's heart. He suddenly tells you, "You know, it was very foolish of me to leave you, but I'll remain with the other woman anyway. Everything still lies ahead. So carry on praying. Pay no heed to what he says, for he does not know his future." So you continue to pray. His new woman doesn't know the future either, so she says something to him too. But you are the only one who knows the future, because you know the 3 stages of victory over fate. So you continue your prayer. I'm explaining to you the sequence of events because I've seen it happen many times in life. Now this is what happens further. Not only does he befriend you, but also his feelings for the children awaken, if you have any, and so does the desire to care for you. He says, "Let me do this for the children and let me help you in this or another way." You reply, "All right, I don't mind." And at this point, you don't mind it indeed. And all this time, you are conscious of the fact that God has punished you for your mistakes. That's why you can interact with him so easily and calmly, for it is your own fate. What happens next? He asks you, "May I ask for your advice? I'm having trouble with my new woman." And as we are friends, that's your next test. You are such a wise woman, I can see it. So, could you please explain to me what I ought to do in the situation I am currently in? And you honestly explain to him, trying to preserve his relationship with his new woman. But it's not always possible to salvage what's crumbling, for God holds both of you together, not him and his new woman. He decided to act this way against God's will, in which case it won't work. That's the law. Further along the line, he asks you, "Can I stay overnight at your place? I don't feel comfortable at my place, but here it's so peaceful, I feel at home here." Later, he has no wish to leave, so he stays. But as for his conscience and everything else, it will come later, not now. Right now he just returns. Raise your hand if your husband has returned through prayer. 3 of you. And whose husband has almost returned? This is the third stage. They have become more caring and friendly lately, haven't they? The third stage of victory over fate is underway. Get ready, wash bed linen, make the bed, and so on. You transcend your fate, so it doesn't matter to you whether he's married or not, because fate depends not on the man, but on God. You just see all the stages through. What stage are you at now? I don't love him, he's a bad person. This means you need to first accept your fate and then go through these 3 stages. As you pray, the understanding comes that he's a good person. It's my fate at fault. It's me who did something wrong. You need to go through it all. You need to pray to defeat your fate. Whether you want it or not, you must get over your fate. Because women like you ask me, Oleg Gennadyevich, when will God give me a good man? I have left my man and he's suffering. When will God give me a good man? My answer is, God has a multitude of men, but they are all loved by him. So he won't just let you ruin a man's life for no reason. Express penitence, pray, and God will decide whether to return your man to you or give you another one on a trial period. You don't need to make decisions for God, otherwise you'll end up alone. It's God who decides everything. I don't want such fate, you may exclaim. But no one asks us whether we want our fate or not. Did we give birth to ourselves? No. We were just born. No one had asked us. Similarly, no one asks us if we want this man or another. Do you think you have found him yourself? No, God has given him to you. You didn't search. He imposed himself on you, didn't he? Yes, you didn't want it, but he just imposed himself on you, rascal. And he talked you into it. It was God acting through his heart. He's still waiting for you, isn't he? Did you have lightness in your heart? Well, obviously you wanted him to leave you alone. I know you don't wish him any harm. I want to explain to you that it's not entirely his fault. Well, you must repent, otherwise you'll end up in his shoes. You'll be imposing yourself on someone, he'll agree, and then he'll just dump you. Do you need that? Do you think there is no second episode? You must be remorseful. We've been through this countless times already. I'm by no means against you. Everything is fine. The purpose of our life is God, my darlings, not a person or marriage. These are only gifts, and our aim is the one who bestows those gifts upon us. Caring only for our personal good is the stinginess of our hearts, which we must set aside and start living for God. I need this and that. Why doesn't he give it to me? This is the stinginess of our hearts every time we think about ourselves. This constant thinking of ourselves means that we are just walking the path of our destiny and cannot overcome it. One can only defeat their destiny when their attention is diverted from it. When one gets distracted from their destiny, then they begin to live a normal life. At first, a person begins to notice nature, birds. They start paying attention to the beauty of the world because they have taken their mind off their fate. Then they begin to see the kindness of people, and finally they are able to perceive God and His majesty. There are 3 stages of detachment from one's destiny. One has to go through these stages. Now, the second type of walking the road of one's fate, people walk that path rather than crawling along it like those in the mode of ignorance do, who are unwilling to live in compliance with the laws of God. So they walk the road of destiny watching their feet. They are very much attached to their fate, to their children, to their jobs, to their problems, and therefore they can't forget about it for a second. And when they encounter an obstacle, they bump into it and are stymied and get stressed as they don't know what to do about it. People who watch their feet, they don't have the option to overcome their fate. That's why they suffer and worry greatly when they have to face an obstacle. This philosophy is called luck. They only wish for luck in their lives so that they never encounter serious hurdles. This is the idleness of the soul. They are reluctant to make an effort to overcome their fate. So when they face obstacles, they tremble and cry, "Help me, Lord, somebody help me. Somebody give me the grace to overcome it." But the truth is that this hurdle occurs only because you have to surmount it yourself. And you must know how to do it. You have to understand that there are 3 ways of defeating fate. The first way is ascetic practices for the body if the obstacle you face is an illness. There is no other way around it. You will have to work with your body. If the obstacle is related to your social life, then you have to learn to love people in the field which causes you trouble. And if that obstacle concerns your spiritual life, you will have to learn to pray. But we must always remember that all kinds of knowledge in this world come solely through our service to God. Therefore, never disregard the most significant kind of activity. which is learning to read scriptures, learning to be grateful to elders for the knowledge we receive from them. This is our service to God. A person should learn to visit the temple to help there in whatever way they can. This is the service to God. A person must learn to listen to those who pray and pray with them. This is the service to God. A person must learn to believe in holy water, in holy earth, in saints. They must learn to believe in holy icons. They must learn to attend spiritual events. All of that is our service to God, for it gladdens Him. God is a personality and He loves such things. God is like the sun. He is a great personality unlike us. We are little sparks. We are like sparks flying away from God, which means being fettered by fate. Fate is when we focus on ourselves. Like in verse, leave your worries, your ups and downs behind. Ask the strict life which path to tread. Follow the sun, although that path is unknown. Do you see what I mean? A spark flies away from the sun and thus vanishes. We are drawn to our troubles. I have no time to visit the temple, Oleg Gennadievich. I have so much to do. A person flies further away from the sun and goes out like a spark. Follow the sun, although that path is unknown. Go forth, my friend, always follow the path of kindness. It turns out that following the path of kindness means turning back towards the sun. It's your fate that drags you away. Now, in spite of having no time, swivel round and go back towards the sun. Leave your worries, your ups and downs behind. Understand that this life is not a child's game. And if a friend is in trouble, hasten to help them. Do not hope for a miracle. Always walk the path of kindness. Walking the path of kindness means ceasing to be selfish, at least for the sake of your friend to begin with, at least for the sake of a beggar or anyone in need, and starting to do something for someone else, not only for yourself. This is when victory over fate begins. Follow the sun. It means that God is pleased that you live this way. And as a result, there is an exchange. A spark shines brighter as it gets closer to the sun. Similarly, a person grows, becomes stronger and more powerful. Their faith becomes a blessing for them. How can you tell if you're on the right track? A person says, "Thank you, my Lord, for causing me to go through this ordeal. I have become stronger." Just as that man said, "Thank you, my Lord, for causing me to go through this ordeal. I have become stronger." How many of you have felt this in your lives? Then you are on the right track. Looking for a lighter burden? I roam the roads of my life looking for a lighter burden. We look for an easy burden. But once one has believed in God, then their burden, which is whatever befalls them, becomes a blessing for them. And when whatever befalls them in their life turns into a boon, then their burden becomes light. Remember, this is how your fate becomes favorable. It is when you accept whatever befalls you in life. And that's why Jesus Christ showed everyone how to accept one's cross. He had a big cross, whereas we have small ones, and we all have to accept it anyway. For if a person does not accept their cross, their country, their family, husband, wife, children, they cannot accept their fate. That's why I am telling you, even though you have no wish to listen to me, accept your husband. It doesn't matter whether or not you will live with him in the end. If you don't accept him, you won't be able to proceed on the path of your fate in the right way. Accept him because he represents your fate. If God sends him back to you, you must agree to that. But most likely he won't, because God is not going to torture you. Accept him. And then you can transcend your destiny, because a burden becomes a blessing, and it thus becomes lighter for the one who understands these laws. I believed, he says, and then I realized that my burden is a boon for me. It's a blessing for me, because your character is very strong, terribly stubborn, and hugely moody. And so it is a boon. And you therefore get someone who is willing to tolerate and accept it all, while another person won't. That's why you have to accept the one God has given you. He sends someone who can endure you, even though you may not like that person. Try to comprehend it. So what is the purpose of human life? What is our true destiny? What is our destiny? Don't listen to all those astrologers or anyone else. A person's destiny has only one purpose. And the answer is very simple. First of all, I do not regret anything. Accept it. When the foundation is sturdy, the house is also robust. And what I have learned through hard work is the most precious thing for me. The most precious indeed. You have learned something through toil. This is what you have lived your life for, because it won't happen again in the next life. Those realizations that are the results of your trials and ordeals constitute your fate. Everything else is just exams. A person's destiny is not their horoscope. It's not that someone shouldn't buy a raincoat for autumn. A person's destiny consists of the hardest realizations, and therefore truly pursue your destiny. Make an effort to comprehend what you have to comprehend. It will be grasped with great difficulty because the real-life exams are hard to understand. It is not easy to realize that you needn't seek something new, but should rather accept something old, because without that acceptance you can't go on with your life. You can't. It's impossible. What we have to learn through hard work constitutes the toil of the soul. It's not about slicing cucumbers or earning money. It is the work of the soul, but the soul is idle. It is loath to accept it. It says, give me something else, I can't accept it. 4. Only the divine power of faith and prayer can enable a person to accept their burden, which is a tall order, virtually impossible. So what kinds of fate exist? A person's fate can be easy, medium, difficult, and unbearable. Oleg Gennadievich, why did I come here? Moreover, I'll tell you something else now. You can laugh about it. When a person has an easy fate, God thinks, I wish he hadn't been born. People think, well, give me an easy fate. Oleg Gennadievich, help me to have an easy fate. Know now that easy fate means the absence of progress, which is a curse. A person savors their life. Everything is amazing. Money is heaped upon them. They have purchased, let's say, a submarine, or even a ship with a few submarines on it, and everything is terrific. What's the problem, guys? This is an easy fate. A man is driving a Zaporozhets. The car overturns. He gets out and exclaims, oh no, I've been working my whole life to buy this car. It is wrecked now. This is the end. He slumps onto the ground, moaning and weeping. The other one is driving a Volga. The car overturns in the same pothole. He gets out saying, well, the repair is going to cost me that much, as he starts thinking and scratching his head. The third one is driving a Jeep and the same nuisance befalls him. He gets out crying excitedly, guys, have you seen it? It's been spectacular, hasn't it? The one in a Zaporozhets has the best fate, because he will surely come to God. God has given him such a fate purposely. There are two types of attitude towards fate. One is a human approach. You won't be able to change this, my darlings, and I shan't be either. Everything I'm telling you now, I'm telling against my own will. I have to tell you so. Like you, I want to have an easier fate as well. All people crave that, but God wants something different for us. Because when a person has a difficult fate, that person grows. This is exactly what God desires. He needs us to progress. In the most difficult times we muse, when will it eventually come to an end? However, God muses, let it last a little longer. For it gives us the opportunity to evolve, my dear people. That is what human life is meant for. Not to savor life to the fullest. And this is why the most difficult times of someone's life are considered to be the best times from God's perspective. But from our point of view, they are the worst times, and we can't change this attitude. For we truly yearn solely for happiness, that's all. It is a very silly desire. No one longs for adversity, no one is willing to suffer. There was one saint woman who had direct contact with God and said to him, let these woes recur over and over again, for again and again we shall be able to remember thee. And remembering him means getting rid of all this nightmare and entering a spiritual reality which is free of suffering. Do you see what kind of a woman she was? She said to God directly, let these woes recur over and over again. Everyone asked God for something different, but she said, nay, that's exactly what I am asking for. I thought, it's such a superb prayer, splendid, a marvelous prayer. That was about 12 years ago. I chanted this prayer for 6 months, let these woes recur over and over again, in Sanskrit. So I began to chant it. Wonderful. God mused, does he genuinely desire it? Well, he mulled it over for about 6 months. Meanwhile, I went on repeating, let these woes recur over and over again. Let these woes recur over and over again. And he fulfilled my wish in the end. Then 1.5 years of sheer nightmare ensued. My memory is shutting down about everything that happened. I can't call it back to mind. But I don't pray like that anymore. Don't pretend to be a saint. No need to show off before God. This is a fact that we are not able to wish for suffering. We should simply wish for an easier way. That's fine. But we need to bear in mind that God has other plans. If you say, Oleg Gennadievich, what's the matter? If God is so merciful, why is there no improvement in my life? It is because He has got other plans for you. Because He wants you to become truly better and not what you wish for. This is what lies behind the idea of two kinds of attitude towards fate. A fate of medium difficulty means more blessings. A difficult fate means even more blessings. And an unbearable fate means the maximum grace that God can bestow upon a person. Yet none of us craves that. When we see that God has given a person maximum grace and has also given them the strength to cope with it, it means that in the next life, this person will be on a much higher platform than we can even imagine. This is their springboard to advance in life differently from how we can do. That's why don't judge what happens to a person, don't judge their fate. If a person has the hardest fate and can handle it, that means they are the most fortunate one, my dear people. But it's very hard to comprehend. All the more reason not to chant those prayers. I don't recommend you. I have tried it. Nothing good. However, there are saints who pray this way. But they are saints. They have a different life. They are 1,000,000 times stronger than us. Destiny is always a road and it never goes sideways. It is impossible to stray from the road of one's destiny. It either rises into the sky or plunges to earth. If a person regresses, their destiny plunges to earth and they live as an animal already in this life. You look like a pig, you live like a pig. You're as stubborn as a ram, you already resemble a ram. Listen, are you a sleazebag? How can you act this way? Only sleazebags act like this. Why are you so dull, like a donkey? Do you see what I mean? The transformation of consciousness takes place and the outcome is already evident. I have listed the animals for a reason. Give it a thought. Because a person begins to resemble someone already in this life. And then you can infer what will happen next. It's not difficult to figure out, is it? If a person behaves this way, I hate everyone, get off, woof woof. Alright, get ready then. Soon they'll be barking for real. No one will prohibit it. In a human body you can be incarcerated or fined for that. And in the next life, in a different body, you can bark at everyone as much as you want. No problem. And if you want to be a big dog, you can even become a president's dog. And you'll bark at everyone lawfully, no problem whatsoever. Bark even at the president. You're a dog, after all, so you have the right to bark at everyone. But in the human form of life, you best not do it. You better do something useful for people. So there are only these kinds of fate. It is a fact that easy fate is a curse. Medium fate is the case for the majority of people. Difficult fate is rare. It is a unique fate. There are two categories of people who have a difficult fate. Some of them have come from inferior forms of life into the human body. So they have a difficult fate, because they are not yet worthy of a human body, and they therefore have various disabilities and so on. As a rule, these people are not very bright. They have weak intelligence and dull mind. The second category of people with a difficult fate are those who walked the spiritual path very seriously in the past life and besought God. Please keep me away from any material happiness in the next life. All I want is to serve Thee and contemplate Thee. I do not need anything else. Then God gives such a person what they appealed for. He gives them a hard life. One can have some physical defects, but at the same time, this person has a very sharp mind and extremely pure consciousness. This means that when this person surmounts all the trials of their life, they will achieve the highest level of existence in the next life. We can't even dream about what awaits them in their next life, only because they opt to suffer for the sake of God. It is crucial for them to accept their fate. This is of the uttermost significance. There are a few other variants of difficult fate. For example, a small child lived only for a few years and then passed away. Their parents plumbed the depths of despair in a bid to fathom out why such a horrific punishment befell them. However, there was no punishment, in fact. Their child got over their little fate and proceeded further. They didn't actually even live here. They weren't supposed to dwell here long, so they left this world. They went to heavenly planets because they're supposed to dwell in bliss. Yet, Their parents have no knowledge about that because they are terribly distressed and depressed. They don't have a clue that the child has gone to the higher planets and has become a guardian angel for them. They will be sending God's grace to them for the rest of their lives, only because they enabled the child to accomplish their difficult fate and go where they were supposed to go. Is that clear? And if the parents calmed their minds down, they would sense God's grace from their child and would be pleased. Well, not that they would be truly glad in such circumstances, but they would be very grateful and feel purity and blessings from their child. One man came up to me once and said, "Oleg Gennadievich, I had a very pure and wonderful family. I had 2 children and a wife. They were all engaged in spiritual practice, and I have never known more pure and more virtuous people in my life. And don't think that I am saying this to you because I have lost them. You see, I'm not wistful. I've genuinely never seen such people in my life. We had a happy family. Yet one by one, all of them passed away before my eyes. Now I have a question for you. Oleg Gennadievich, what kind of ordeal is that? You always assert that when a person lives a righteous life, they receive happiness. Why then have I received such horrendous suffering if I have been living a righteous life?" I prayed in my mind for a while. Then I revealed to him what God had hinted at in my heart. In fact, all of them have gone up to the higher planets. They are delighted now that they have accomplished their difficult fate here on Earth, and they are waiting for you to join them there. And the time will come when you will be reunited with them, and you will dwell together in sheer bliss. That was my answer to him. He gazed at me with confidence and power. He said to me, "I knew you would tell me that, because I feel it myself. But I longed for some confirmation, so I asked you." And thereupon his eyes gleamed with purity, and he rejoiced in his heart. It meant that he had accepted his fate and won. And his fate is wonderful and will continue to be such. But if you think you don't need such a marvelous fate, then you are not ready for it. And God hasn't planned such a destiny for you. Every person receives only what they can bear. No need to think that if you choose this path of overcoming your fate now, God will lumber you with such troubles. No, on the contrary, it will be easier. Why? Because God sends such difficulties only to great and remarkable people who do not grumble about it. For this reason, don't be afraid that your life may become unbearable just because you've resolved to tread the path of self-improvement. It will be the other way around. The further a person advances on this path, the softer their fate eventually becomes. There are certain stages of the improvement of their fate. The first stage is about plumbing and discovering the new world. A person feels that their life has changed. They feel that this world is different from what they thought it was, as they begin to perceive the beauty and the depth of this world. So they carry on exploring. They derive excitement from living. They realize that their life is not meaningless by virtue of that process of learning. How many of you are at this stage? Raise your hands. The next stage of the victory over fate is when a person finds different friends. They meet many friends who walk the same path. They revel in befriending them as they see it as their destiny, their new life. Raise your hands, those of you who are going through this stage. The next stage is when a person starts to understand what to do in life, and his activities become different, and they derive pleasure from that. Who is at this stage? And the next stage, as a person begins to engage in new activities, their victory over fate deepens, and as a result, the relationship with their loved ones improves. This comes as a miracle because they have never believed it could be possible, and the relationship genuinely improves. Even if their loved one is a drunkard, they stop drinking and everything changes for the better, but very slowly, because this stage is arduous. Once this stage is over, they witness their children change for the better as well. They begin to influence their children, and hence the children start to change. At the next stage, their parents and other relatives change for the better too. They also embark upon the path of goodness. Thus, everything around this person gradually becomes pure and beautiful. Once everything around a person has become pure, they do not see bad people around them anymore, nor do they see any deception or filth. This means that they merit heavenly life right here on earth. and they will dwell here as though in paradise. This is what a heavenly life is, seeing only good people around, having a good job and good health, having good relations with relatives, rearing good children and the like. One begins to dwell as though in paradise here on earth. There was a woman once upon a time. Her name was Queen Kunti. She lived 5,000 years ago. She had 5 holiest sons on earth. There were no holier people at the time. And she appealed to God, "Free me from the attachment to my sons." As the Ganges flows towards the sea, undistracted by anything else, so I wish to aspire solely for thee. Another challenge for women, isn't it? Remember, you oughtn't to emulate such people. This is impossible. If one renounces all the material happiness they have received in this life, they enter a spiritual reality which is indescribable. I can't tell you anything about it, for I have no conception of it myself. But you should know that even if one goes to heavenly planets in the next life, which is this reality, then they still can continue to develop there and engage in spiritual practice. This person does not lose their spiritual progress. Therefore, a person who develops and grows spiritually never loses anything. This is why I am saying to you that all of you have a good fate. For destiny is not something that is drawn in the horoscope. Destiny is what one aspires for and how one lives. There are people who regress. There are those who live like everyone else does and do not change anything in their lives. And there are those who evolve and thus become fortunate living beings. You should know that fortunate ones are few and far between. Perhaps 1% on earth, or maybe even less. That is why you do not meet so many like-minded people. In general, people who are keen to progress in this life are thin on the ground. For the most part, people live just like everyone else. Some people even regress. They are not numerous either, but they certainly outnumber those who progress. So we've run out of time, unfortunately. Tomorrow we shall talk about the signs of destiny. There are different signs. I'll tell you how to read those signs, how to determine what may come to pass in your life, and how to transcend it. Now everyone sit upright. There are approximately 800 people here. This is a unique time for us. Now all these people are going to listen to a prayer and repeat as those who are praying. You will be listening to a prayer and repeating, "I wish happiness to everyone." The sound is the same for all these people. If you tune into it, if you truly listen very attentively to the sound, then it will bless you to transcend your fate. It has tremendous potency when many people wish everyone happiness together. And it's even greater when they do so whilst listening to a prayer. Listening to a prayer together is a great blessing as well. This listening moves you towards victory over your fate. It is paramount to comprehend how fate is surmounted. It is overcome in memory. Don't think about yourselves right now. And even if you do think about yourselves, then try to divert your attention from it. Focus on everyone being happy around you rather than concentrating on yourself. Try to listen intently to those who are praying and repeat as they do in their state of mind. There is the sound of emotion. That sound does not defeat fate. There is the sound of the mind. That's when you are in a good mood. Or, that's when you are in a bad mood. The sound does not defeat fate either. Fate is defeated by the sound of memory. Listen to it. I'll be chanting now with the sound of memory. Chanting not from myself, but in memory of those who are praying. Listen now to how the sound of memory sounds. What do I think of whilst praying? I think about the lives of those people who are praying, their sound, their character, their resolve to serve God. I try to emulate them. I try to be their servant. I try to merge with them in their desire to serve God. I forget about myself in it. And in that moment, when I think this way, I begin to produce the sound of intelligence. The intelligence is the power that overcomes fate. But first it must be linked to the memory of those who pray. And then God will give you the opportunity to remember Him. But it will happen a little later. It is impossible to remember God straight away from the outset. For we can only think of ourselves at the outset. So now all together in unison.